The planet was quiet from orbit. Vast oceans, dense forests, scattered volcanic ranges glowing faintly beneath drifting cloud layers. No orbital infrastructure, no energy signatures, no satellites. The Kirin exploration vessel logged it as a Class 3 developing biosphere, biologically rich, technologically absent. It was not supposed to be significant. Then the scanners detected movement near a river delta. A small bipedal organism stood on the shoreline, gripping a crude stone tool. It looked upward as the Kirin shuttle descended through the clouds. The creature did not run. It did not hide. It simply watched, wide-eyed, as light bathed the water around it. The Kirin crew debated intervention protocols. Standard exploration doctrine required non-interference, but long-range scans had revealed something troubling. This planet was not alone in its system. Every few cycles, massive migratory predators, void-adapted organisms, passed through, descending to feed, before vanishing back into deep space. This world would not survive indefinitely without advancement. The smallest Kirin biologist stepped forward when the shuttle ramp lowered. The primitive creature flinched, then reached out cautiously. It was thin, fragile, curious. The biologist extended a nutrient capsule and placed it in the creature's hand. It sniffed it, tasted it, and its eyes widened with something unmistakably understanding. The Kirin named the creature Erin. They did not know its species name. They did not know its history. They only knew that this world would eventually face extinction unless it grew stronger. And so, against protocol, they decided to help. The Kirin were not conquerors. They were observers, archivists of civilizations, careful gardeners of knowledge across the spiral arms. Their doctrine forbade domination and discouraged interference. Species were meant to rise by their own effort. But this world presented an anomaly. Long-range astrophysical tracking confirmed that every few thousand planetary rotations, massive void-born entities entered the system, creatures older than most civilizations, descending briefly to hunt, before vanishing again into interstellar darkness. The primitive beings on the surface had no awareness of the cycle. They had no telescopes, no orbital awareness, no understanding of what would eventually arrive. They hunted with stone. They sheltered in caves. They spoke in fractured sounds and gesture. Left alone, they would evolve slowly, too slowly. If you are watching from a place that once depended on guidance, from a city built on knowledge passed down by those who came before, then you understand what the Kirin faced. Tell me your city and country in the comments. Let this story travel. If you believe growth is strongest when knowledge is shared, press like KN. If you stand with civilizations that choose to protect rather than dominate, subscribe. The Kirin Council aboard the exploration vessel voted narrowly. Intervention would be limited, structured, and educational. No weapons transfers, no domination of culture. Only language, science, and infrastructure fundamentals. They would teach. They would not rule. The small biped the biologist named Erin became the bridge. Through Erin, they would build communication. Through communication, understanding. And through understanding, a future strong enough to survive what the stars would eventually send. Erin learned quickly. Faster than Kirin cognitive models predicted for a species at its developmental stage. Within weeks, the small biped began mimicking phonetic structures from the Kirin language, reshaping unfamiliar sounds through a primitive vocal system not designed for complex tonal resonance. The Kirin linguists adjusted their syntax, simplifying structure, breaking concepts into layered patterns Erin could process. Communication was not immediate, but it was inevitable. The first complete word Erin spoke in Kirin was not food, nor light, nor sky. It was why. The biologist froze when the translation lattice confirmed it. The creature was not merely absorbing vocabulary, it was seeking causality. That single question altered the Kirin Council's perception. This was not a species awaiting uplift. This was a species waiting for context. Through patient repetition, Erin learned symbols. The Kirin projected simple geometric forms into the soil beside the river delta. Circles became suns, lines became paths, angles became shelters, stronger than stacked stone. Within months, Erin began teaching others from its tribe. Knowledge spread through imitation first, then intention. Fires were no longer accidents of friction, they were control tools. The Kirin did not deliver machines. They delivered principles, leverage, structural reinforcement. Agricultural cycles aligned with seasonal shifts. The tribe that once followed herds blindly began cultivating stable food sources near the riverbanks. Shelter designs improved. Infant survival rates increased. The tribe's numbers grew steadily, not through conquest, but through stability. From orbit, the Kirin recorded progress with cautious optimism. The planet was changing, but not unnaturally. The tribe retained its culture, its rhythm, its sense of belonging to land and sky. The Kirin were careful not to dominate thought. They answered questions. They did not dictate belief. And each time Erin looked upward at the silent vessel in the clouds, the Kareen understood they were not creating dependency. They were nurturing potential. Years passed, and the river tribe was no longer isolated, guided by principles rather than commands. Erin and the early learners began traveling beyond the delta, carrying structured language and practical knowledge to neighboring groups. They did not speak of the Kareen as rulers. They spoke of them as voices from the sky. The teaching focused on patterns: how to observe the sun's path, how to measure time by shadow, how to predict floods by subtle changes in wind and animal behavior. The Kareen introduced mathematics not as abstraction, but as survival, counting harvest yields, estimating distances between settlements, calculating load-bearing limits for primitive bridges spanning narrow canyon crossings. What began as survival tools slowly evolved into curiosity. Tribes began carving symbols into stone, not just for record-keeping, but for memory. The first written marks emerged not because they were told to write, but because they wanted permanence. Metallurgy followed naturally. The Kareen did not deliver refined alloys. They explained heat gradients, mineral composition, and pressure. When one tribe discovered copper veins beneath a hillside, they experimented cautiously. Fire pits grew hotter, tools grew sharper, hunting became more efficient, farming tools became durable. With stability came time, and with time came thought. The Kareen monitored atmospheric changes, biodiversity shifts, and technological acceleration carefully. They had no intention of forcing rapid industrialization. The goal was resilience, not dominance. When Erin, now older, wiser, asked about the stars beyond the blue sky, the Kareen showed simple constellations and orbital cycles. They did not mention the void-born predators yet. That knowledge required readiness. Across centuries, the planet transformed gradually. Villages became settlements. Settlements became cities of stone and timber. Language diversified, but retained core structures seeded by Kareen syntax. Mathematics matured into geometry. Geometry evolved into engineering. The Kareen watched something remarkable unfold. They were no longer leading. They were observing a civilization beginning to accelerate on its own. The Kareen observatory arrays detected the migration, patterned decades before the planet's inhabitants could possibly comprehend it. A distortion in deep space telemetry. Massive biosignatures emerging from interstellar darkness. The void-born predators had adjusted their cycle. They were arriving earlier than predicted. The planet's civilization had advanced cities, metallurgy, early mechanical systems, but it was not yet spacefaring, not yet capable of planetary defense. The Kareen Council faced a difficult choice. Their doctrine permitted guidance. It did not permit warfare on behalf of developing species, but this was no ordinary threat. The void-born organisms descended not for conquest, but for feeding. They consumed biomass at continental scale before drifting onward. If they arrived unchallenged, centuries of growth would be erased in a single planetary season. Erin, now an elder figure among her people, sensed the urgency in the Koreans' tone when they finally explained the truth. Through refined translation systems and shared symbolic modeling, the Kareen projected images of the creature's vast organic silhouettes eclipsing starlight. The tribes did not respond with panic. They responded with questions. How large? How fast? How vulnerable? That response changed everything. The Kareen had prepared humanity to build, to calculate, to engineer, but they had not expected strategic thinking at this scale so early. The planet's scientists began collaborating across distant regions using signal towers and coded light transmissions. Metallurgy shifted toward alloy experimentation. Energy research accelerated. Humanity did not beg for rescue. It asked for data. The Kareen provided models, not weapons. They shared gravitational mathematics, propulsion fundamentals, and energy containment theory in simplified stages. The rest unfolded rapidly. Workshops became laboratories. Laboratories became research complexes. Within a few generations, the first crewed orbital launch vehicle pierced the upper atmosphere. It did not reach the Karen vessel, but it reached the stars. And when it did, the Kareen realized something profound. They were no longer preparing humanity to survive. Humanity was preparing itself. The first void-born shadow appeared at the edge of the atmosphere like a moving eclipse. It did not roar. It did not blaze with fire. It drifted vast, silent, ancient, its bioluminescent veins pulsing faintly as it adjusted to planetary gravity. From the surface, humanity watched through telescopes and orbital satellites they had launched only years earlier. There was fear, yes, but it was structured fear. Data streamed into global networks in real time. Trajectory, mass estimate, atmospheric drag. The second and third organisms followed within hours, descending toward oceanic regions rich in biomass. The Kareen vessels held position in high orbit, observing. They would intervene only if extinction became unavoidable. That had always been the agreement within their council. This was humanity's test. not of survival but of independence. Humanity did not scatter. Defense platforms activated from orbital stations constructed in the previous decade. Energy arrays powered up across multiple continents, synchronized through quantum communication principles, first introduced centuries earlier by the Kirin. The predators were immense, but not invulnerable. Their outer membranes responded to directed electromagnetic bursts. Their internal buoyancy fields fluctuated under sustained interference. The first coordinated strike launched from 3 orbital platforms simultaneously. Beams of focused energy intersected along the creature's midsection, destabilizing its atmospheric control organs. The void-born organism convulsed not in agony, but in confusion before adjusting altitude abruptly. Humanity recalibrated within seconds. They had studied the models. They had improved them. The second strike was precise, targeting neural clusters mapped from Kirin biological archives. Within hours, the void-born predators altered course, not destroyed, driven away. Their migration vector shifted toward deep space, abandoning the planet as hostile territory. Humanity had not annihilated an ancient species. It had defended its home with discipline and coordination. From orbit, the Kirin observed in silence. They had intended to help this world survive. Instead, they had witnessed it stand on its own. The Kirin found a primitive world by accident. They expected to nurture it quietly, perhaps forever. Instead, they witnessed resilience awaken into innovation. They gave food, language, and principles. Humanity transformed those gifts into science, unity, and defense. When the sky opened and danger descended, it did not kneel. It calculated, and somewhere in deep space, the Kirin record now carries a simple annotation beside that once primitive world. Not a project, a partner.